what's going through your head?
From a standpoint of the situation we were in at that time, this team had flown just about 14 missions together, so we were pretty well experienced as a group of people. The one deficiency we had at that time, however, is the LIM spacecraft was inert, so I did not have one member of the lunar module team in there, and he was in the process of basically going through his procedures, making sure everything was squared away for the start of his shift. We had already had a couple of power glitches earlier in the shift, one associated with the oxygen tank to another one with the high gain antenna. We had seen as controllers many power glitches in the spacecraft, so the immediate call that we got, the main bus undervolt and the various reports that we got from the crew, plus the controllers, basically just indicated to me for the first couple of minutes that we got a power problem. We're going to sort this guy out, get back on track. No sweat. We'll hand it over to the next shift. We'll solve this problem, stabilize it out, and get going. But about 3 minutes after the call, one of my controllers, Buck Willoughby, called up and said, "Hey, it looks like we got a whole bunch of these jet select valves closed off." And the crew reported a pretty loud bang. And that very quickly brought me back to Apollo 9, where the undocking transient closed off a whole bunch of valves, and we started maneuvering away at the spacecraft, depleting the propellants in the lines. So this now moved from we'll solve the problem easy to tread lightly lest you step in crap. But the third phase came in just about 4 or 5 minutes later when Jim called down that he saw something venting, and there it went into survival mode. So that was sort of the sequence we had. Throughout this whole thing, it was really frustration. Jack Lausma was my Capcom at that time. And we saw the crew going through various configurations up there trying to make sure they had power in the buses. And we always seemed to be about one step behind what the crew was doing. And Jack kept saying, "Is there anything we can do to help them out?" And this was probably the one thing that I just remember those words. But eventually we got in sync. We were probably about 15 minutes after the explosion. We had concluded we had a major power problem on board the spacecraft, possibly a survival issue. And I was very fortunate because I had, we were just about shift change time. I had Glenn Lunny, who was probably the most trajectory experienced flight director that I had. And he went down into the trench, and within a matter of minutes, he brought me back 5 maneuver options. 3 coming around the front side of the moon, 2 going around the moon. And basically laid him out and says, pretty soon you're going to have to make a decision on which path you're going to take. And that was, I think, the #1 and probably the earliest decision that we had made, is to pick the path going back. At the same time, we were very lucky. The LIM team we had, back in training in Apollo 9, it seemed that we would separate the lunar module from the command module. For some reason, SimSoup would give us a case where we couldn't maneuver the lunar module anymore. So we had to develop a power down checklist, survival checklist to allow the command service module to come out and do a rescue. So we had a lot of things at our hand to start working the immediate problem. And those were the background, plus the training we had, that really helped us start stabilizing the situation. Pick a direction. I picked the direction that we were going to go around the moon before we pulled the Tiger team together and started working the problem associated with the power management, which was the initial challenge.
Thank you, Gene. That had to be absolutely fascinating. Charlie, you were there. Why don't you tell us what you did when you got back to mission control, and what actions you took and what things you got involved in to help get the crew back?
Well, the most important thing that I felt like we had to do as a crew was to get them back on a free return trajectory. And John and I and some of the other guys went over to mission control, to the simulator building, and we started doing the procedures to burn the lunar module and get them back on free return and get them back around the moon. I remember John and I, and probably Ken, when I got there, it was 35 hours later that I left mission control, or either there or the simulator. So we were there for a long time, and by the time we left mission control, things were pretty well stabilized. And I said, we're gonna, if they don't we don't screw up, we got enough stuff to get back. By the stuff I meant oxygen and electrical power and stuff like that in the lunar module. And that turned out to be, to me, the biggest problem is how do you manage these consumables to make them last for 99 hours? Because we had a lunar module that was two guys for 3 days designed, and it was now 3 guys for 4 days. And we got to make this stuff last. And the teams, various teams in Mission Control, Gene's team and others figured out how to make this stuff last, and that was really a fantastic deal. Because when I first looked at it, I said, you know, we're not going to make it. But sure enough, we got smart enough to make everything last, and we had enough stuff to get back, and nobody made a mistake.
You know, it's kind of interesting. Many decisions were made correctly at the right time. And that really set up a return trajectory that got the guys home. It's the implementation of those decisions and the procedures that were developed that the crew had to perform in flight to get them back. And, you know, obviously they worked. Let's see some footage of the source module jettison from the lunar module and preparation for reentry. That we're getting along towards the end of the flight.